Hi, this is your Swapnil Bhartiya, and we are here at VMware Explore. Today we have with us once again Chip Childers, now Chief Open Source Officer at VMware. Chip, it's great to see you again after a long time in person.
Yeah, it has been a while. It's great to be here at VMware Explore. For me, this is first event that's in person, that's live. It's something that since the pandemic started, of course, it's something that honestly I've missed. I'm happy to be here and happy to get to see people in all three dimensions that we live in.
Right. You joined VMware as Chief Open Source Officer. VMware has been doing open source for quite some time. And you have been in the space for so long. So when you joined, is there a challenge for you really here? Or it's like so smooth ride. So I don't. so talk about the VMware's open source, whole aspect.
Yeah. So I think first I would say what I've been telling my team here is just fundamentally I believe that you should always be proud about where you are. And I know that VMware should be very proud about where it is in its open source journey, but you should never be satisfied, right? Because you can always go further, you can always do better, you can always increase your level of sophistication, and frankly, increase the impact that we can make on behalf of the customers. So the Open Source Program Office really supports three major pillars of activity inside of VMware. So the first pillar is that we're responsible for helping to maintain compliance, right? So open source licensing compliance, understanding how the software supply chain that makes up our products and services needs to be secured, needs to be managed effectively. And the second pillar has to do with our strategic support or dependency that we draw from lots of third-party projects, as well as the strategic health monitoring of VMware-owned projects, right? And so, I think it's we've got 18 strategic third-party projects, another 15 strategic VMware-owned projects, and so we maintain a health monitoring and then a remediation process that we'll go through in partnership with the product teams. And then the third area that the Open Source Program Office focuses on is ahead of roadmap innovation. And so we have a number of engineers who are very adept at getting involved in open source communities. They know how to engage as a new participant. They know how to then find ways to add value. And they do that for us really for two purposes. One is to help sense the market, right, ahead of where VMware product is. And then two, it's to help make the future that we would like to see in those upstream communities. And then that work eventually, if when we're successful, leads to new products, new services that VMware offers, at which point, our Open Source Technology Center team will rotate on to the next area that's ahead of roadmap. And we'll transition that technology into the business units. So there's a lot of challenge, actually, not just in VMware the way we're doing it today, but moving forward.
We talked about VMware. I want to talk about you also a bit, because before that you were in the foundation, Cloud Foundry Foundation. Now you are in a corporate environment. So how different are these two worlds? But the community is more or less same, right? When we talk about Pivotal and VMware was also there, part of Cloud Foundry. So talk about from your personal view.
Yeah, so there is an overlap specifically in both the Cloud Foundry and the cloud native space, right? In where I was working at the Linux Foundation, supporting the Cloud Foundry project, running that organization for a while. There is a good overlap there. That said, the breadth of VMware's engagement in open source is much broader than even those two domains, which are in and of themselves quite large. Open source is a fundamental building block of enterprise technology across the industry, right? If you're talking about enterprise software, that enterprise software is 100% going to be including open source code, right? And so we have taken strategic dependencies to help build ecosystems across our portfolio, in addition to just simply being an engineering accelerator, right? So you don't have to write every line of code. So the difference, I think, is the breadth of the portfolio that VMware has, number one, knowing that the communities where I have history are a subset of what VMware does care about. At the same time, I have deep context there, right? And so I'm able to provide that. Now, I will say I did have a different role for about 8 months in between working at a foundation and then now joining VMware. But again, it was at a startup. We managed to get that startup acquired, and I spent time there doing much of what I'm now doing at VMware, which is helping to rationalize the open source strategy, helping to develop an innovation program, and in this case, I'm part of an innovation team. And in order to explore adjacencies and new ways to use open source to grow the business.
If you look at open source today, people talk about open core. They're talking about sometimes they are using open source license as a marketing strategy or as a even weapon, against potential competitors, which might hurt open source in long term. Are you worried about that, or you feel, hey, this is just small blips in the much bigger canvas, or you're like, yeah, we should do something about it?
So I think that the nature of the technology industry is that we evolve over time, and there are often periods where things become a bit chaotic, and it's through that chaos that we emerge stronger and more aware of what the best practices are. We solve problems that we may have just not collectively been focused on, right? We're going through a phase right now, I think, the tail end of being much more thoughtful about business models and their relationship with open source as a tactic and open source as a strategy. The more maturity we can drive into the business side of things and understanding how to work in an open way, the better. Because frankly, I think there have been a number of mistakes that have been made throughout the industry. And then that's where you see some of that frantic relicensing work, right? They're trying to recalibrate quickly by using licensing as the lever. So that's kind of one angle to we're going through this bit of chaos, and we're going to emerge healthier as an industry. There's another area of I think really important convergence or recognition that there's work to be done, and that's around securing the supply chain, right? Securing the software supply chain. That's an area where VMware is investing heavily. It's an area where VMware is beginning to productize solutions for our customers so that we can help them with their own software supply chains. And it's frankly something happening across most of the industry right now.
Yes, that's a very pragmatic approach there. But also the business models are changing. That's why, in the early days of open source, it was just, you download the code, you manage it yourself, and then there'll be, but now code is running at the cloud. And sometimes even we look at FSF definition of open source or free software, if I'm not distributing anything, I am not forced to distribute any code. I'm running everything on my server, so I'm not releasing the code. So yes, the market changed, so the definitions also need to evolve and change. But there are some serious problems that companies face, and that's why this struggle is going on. But you're absolutely right that it will, and the community is much larger than it was earlier. So we will figure something out, but this period will remain a bit chaotic.
Yeah, I'd even reframe what you just said to say that it's not that the community is larger. It's that there are multiple communities, right? And
right.
that the industry is now fully engaged in open development and in consuming open source and producing open source. And there isn't a corner of the industry that isn't impacted by that model. And so it's almost too simple to look at it as there's an open source community.
No, I thank you because I always mention there is not a single community. There are communities. When I said community, I in general meant that there are proprietary. I just made two buckets: proprietary companies and open source. So that's what I meant. There are different. Within community, there are Linux kernel. There are different communities,
Absolutely.
So once again, thanks for addressing that. One thing more I want to talk about is, and this could be depending on how you look at it, Broadcom acquisition. Of course, you cannot say much about it because things are in process, everything. But there are some concerns which are always there when Red Hat was going to be acquired by IBM or any other company get acquired. There are some concerns. But if you look at the history of VMware, EMC was there and Dell was there. When I look at it, the vision didn't change. Actually, you folks become more and more committed to open source. If I look at the curve and graph, it's going in a positive direction. But is there anything else that you would like to say to the community to reassure them that they should not worry about this? Your open source strategy and plans will not change, will not have any impact. Or you cannot say anything that's...
The way that I would answer that is I would step back and I would say that at a macro level, there is not a corner of the enterprise software industry that isn't embracing and engaging in open communities in order to build the products that people buy. And that is 100% true at VMware, right? We are, by necessity, actively engaged in open communities, and by necessity, actively engaging upstream communities that we may just purely rely on and use as engineering accelerators. It's pervasive in the industry, right? There is, in fact, in my view, no such thing as a proprietary software company in the pure sense, right? All proprietary software products have open source code embedded in them. Right? Now, the real question is the level of sophistication that an organization has in working in communities to build industry-wide solutions that help project our customers into the future. Now, that's something that VMware is absolutely committed to. A lot of our product portfolio revolves around these strategic community projects, these strategic communities that have built ecosystems that are solving problems in a very new way, and we're solving it across the industry, from the hyperscalers to the startup community to the companies like VMware, right? So it's fundamental to the space that VMware operates within. It's fundamental to our customers, who very much consider an organization's reputation in the open source community as one of their buying decisions. And it's fundamental to our ability to deliver on the latest innovations.
Can you talk about the open source activity here at the event?
Yeah, I mean, it's pervasive. So here at VMware Explore, you're seeing talks that are either directly addressing some of the open source projects that VMware invests in, or the projects that VMware has initiated and is stewarding. But just the same, you're seeing talks that are dealing with our products, our productization of some of those upstream projects, right? So it's all over the place. We saw in the general session, in Raghu's opening, the massive number of developers. I think it was 5 million developers in the Spring community, generating hundreds of thousands of new projects a week. Those are all open source consumers of VMware technology. We are helping application developers, we are helping infrastructure administrators, we are helping cloud and platform teams. All of them are getting the value from VMware products, and those VMware products are being derived from a ton of open source software that we are both developing and participating in.
One of the hottest topic these days is supply chain, software supply chain security. First of all, I want to ask you, because you have been in this committee for so, how much awareness is there among VMware users and customers to understand the supply chain issue at all? Because if you don't understand there's a problem, you won't even try to solve it.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things that are occurring that at a macro level, the entire industry is going through one of these wonderful moments of realization that we have a new opportunity to solve a problem that we may have minimized collectively in the past, right? Now, one of the forcing functions, of course, is the U.S. federal government, the executive order that the White House signed that was demanding a supply chain, or bill of materials, essentially, for every product that the government buys. But even without that, we've reached a point where the potential threat of not having a secure supply chain is becoming evident. And there's a concrete example of that I think is timely. And while I might agree with the sentiment, protestware became a thing as Russia invaded Ukraine, right? Specifically, a bunch of Node.js or several Node.js modules were updated in a way that impacted users in Russia. That is a threat that is specific to a moment, but it's also a very clear example of how we collectively, as an industry, need to recognize that our dependence on these libraries and these modules across the different language families, across the different ecosystems, is intense. And often, we end up relying on the goodwill of one individual. Now, we should embrace their good. We should embrace them. We should support them. But at the same time, we need to develop some better practices, right? And we need to develop some better industry-wide tools and capabilities. And so I'll give you an example there. One of the things that we're investing in within the VMware Open Source Program Office is we're trying to help the Python community do a better job of securing PyPy, right? That is the Python package index. Many language communities are supported by a particular primary vendor, or they may be supported by a couple of vendors that are really dominant in that space, largely because they commercialize it. Python looked like it was an area of opportunity for us, not because of any direct commercialization need, but because it was sort of the white space when we looked across the language communities and ecosystems and said, we're going to go help PyPy. So our team is spending time trying to get the update framework, tough kind of implemented. They have been spending time helping to support the process of getting two-factor authentication turned on for many of those highly used Python packages that have one or two maintainers, right? Trying to help them protect their identity, help them protect their good work. And so there's a lot of work to happen. It's a moment in time here in the industry that everyone is recognizing. And there's a ton of work that VMware is applying towards it, but we're doing it in partnership with a lot of our partners, the cloud providers and other vendors.
Chip, once again, thank you so much for sitting down. But it's really refreshing to see you in person after a long time. So I hope that we will continue to do these hybrid, where sometime I'll talk to you over remote, and sometime we will do it in person. But I really appreciate your time today, and I look forward to what else you're going to do at VMware for the open source office. So thank you for your time today. I appreciate it.
I appreciated spending the time with you and in person, in 3D, and look forward to talking again.